Carolina. I'll get it right after a while. And welcome to our Bible study. Today we're doing one that you're not going to see in the children's Sunday school lessons, nor are you going to see it in the upper room. This is chapter 31 of Numbers, and it's awful. So I just want to give you a heads up, okay? What's going on is that the people, this portion of the Exodus is the people are right on the border of Transjordan, which is the western side of the Jordan, and they're preparing to invade. Now, there has been an issue that they've had to deal with because evidently Midianite women were very attractive and people were mingling with them, and then they were also worshiping the Baal that these women were promoting, which is interesting because Baal was not the god of Midian. But anyway, Moses himself married a Midianite woman, so they must have been good lookers, you know. But anyway, God was not happy with the fact that the Midianite women had ostensibly seduced the Israelite men so that they would go and worship this other god. Okay, so now God's into payback. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, "Avenge the Israelites on the Midianites. Afterward you shall be gathered to your people." What a great thing. This is what I want you to do. Go tell the people to avenge themselves on the Midianites, and then you're going to die. Okay. He's postponed Moses' execution, because that's what it was. He's postponed Moses' execution until after this issue is dealt with the Midianites. Okay. So Moses spoke to the people, saying, "Arm some of your number for war, so that they may go against Midian to execute the Lord's vengeance again on Midian. You shall send 1,000 from each of the tribes of Israel to the war." So that's 12,000. You're looking at something like a small division going into Midian. That's sizable armed force for that day and age. Okay. So out of the thousands of Israel, 1,000 from each tribe were conscripted, 12,000 armed for battle. Moses sent them to the war, 1,000 from each tribe, along with Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, with the vessels of the sanctuary and the trumpets for sounding the alarm in his hand. Okay, so they have taken some things, they don't know what things, out of the temple as part of the part of the symbolism, I guess, or the presence of God in the battle. You have a priest, Phinehas, who is leading this. Phinehas is the general, which is kind of interesting because that's out of the realm of what the priest is supposed to be doing. Normally there's a general, and then there's a priest who advises the general. In this case, Phinehas is the one, and Phinehas is the one, by the way, who speared the Israelite and his Midianite girlfriend, or maybe she was Moabite, but to demonstrate that mixed marriages were not a cool thing. So anyway, Phinehas is a zealot of the highest degree, and so he's going to be leading this army. They're taking vessels from the sanctuary. They don't specify what they are, but they are taking the trumpets, which is a typical thing in war because that's how you signal your orders, is with trumpets. And but what they're doing, they're not saying that the ark went.
But isn't it typically done?
Typically, in later wars,
Okay.
the ark was kind of a deal breaker on the battlefield. So if you took the ark out, then God was going to be definitely with you. But in this case, they took vessels, but it doesn't specify. It wasn't the ark, it could have been. Okay.
Now mine has
Yeah.
accompanied by the ark.
So they said that it was the ark
Well,
in that translation.
yes, it's on verse 6. Phinehas, is that how you say it?
Yeah, Phinehas.
Son of Eleazar the priest led them into battle, accompanied by the ark with trumpets blaring.
Okay, well, one translation has the ark going, this one
So there you go.
is, yeah, pays your money, takes your choice.
There you go.
Did they ever get defeated when they had the ark with them?
Yes,
Wow.
Yes, they
So
did
what
get
happened to the
defeated.
ark then?
It was captured by the Philistines.
Okay.
Yeah, very interesting and funny story.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, it was, under Saul's last battle, they captured the ark. Okay. Okay, so they did battle against Midian as the Lord had commanded Moses and killed every male. They killed the kings of Midian, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. In addition to others who were slain by them, they also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, with the sword. Remember Balaam? Okay, he was the guy who refused to prophesy against Israel. And they killed him, but I think they took his donkey. Anyway. Okay. They killed some. Okay, the Israelites took the women of Midian and their little ones captive, and they plundered all their cattle, their flocks, and all their goods, all their towns they had settled, and their encampments they burned. But they took all the spoil and all the plunder, both people and animals. Then they brought the captives and the plunder and the spoil to Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and to the congregation of the Israelites at the camp on the plains of Moab by the Jordan opposite Jericho. Okay, specifically, why did they go to war with Midian?
Because they thought the women were enticing the men to worship other gods.
Yes, so what do? They bring the women back.
So what is the deal with women? I mean,
Don't ask me.
were women that bad? I mean, were they?
She really does.
Well, we're going to see, because it gets worse.
I know that, but they're always talking about the women, and my word, where are the men?
Oh, they're taking the women.
I know.
Supposedly back then, women were very subordinate to,
Supposedly, but they seem to have an awful lot of influence over these guys.
well, there's a reason for that.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so, right here, you've got a contradiction going on. And there are more, okay? But this gets worse. Moses, Eleazar the priest, and all the leaders of the congregation went to meet them outside the camp. Moses became angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of thousands, the commanders of hundreds, who had come from service in the war. If Moses gets mad at you because of something, then watch out, because there's going to be a plague or something, okay? So anyway, Moses is mad. Moses said to them, "Have you allowed all the women to live? These women here on Balaam's advice, made the Israelites act treacherously against the Lord." So what he's saying is that this same prophet who would not curse Israel was instrumental in getting the Israelite men to fraternize with the women. Okay, and that's why Balaam was killed. All right? Made the Israelites act treacherously against the Lord in the affair of Peor, so that the plague came among the congregation of the Lord. Now therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known a man by sleeping with him.
How do they know that? They go around and say, okay, did you sleep with somebody?
No. No.
Just assume.
I do not recall that.
Okay, so let's go back just a minute. These women here on Balaam's advice made the Israelites act treacherously against the Lord.
Right. Which is odd, because he was very much saying that you couldn't do anything to corrupt them. But here Balaam evidently was trying to get them, to fraternize.
So he understood that men were weak.
Apparently so. And it's
And
true.
he's using, that's true. And he's using the women.
Okay. I mean, it's how the species continues. But anyway.
Today we punish the men for being weak.
Oh,
No, we punish the women for taking advantage of men's weakness.
I can see that.
I just have have a hard time
Take a look at it.
I have a hard time understanding this whole concept of this because, like you say, women were nobodies.
They were property.
They were property.
Yes.
And yet here, they're getting blamed for being the ones that, it seems to me, that were instigating these, lack of a better word, affairs.
Yes. That's right.
They must have been true worshipers of Balaam. He must have had a lot of control over them.
Well, actually, Shemesh was their god, but yeah, but Baal, whatever, some fertility outfit, you know. There's a lot going for fertility, I think, you know. It's very attractive. So,
I'm not so sure it's the fertility.
okay, but typically, this is, I think, one of the things that you see in societies where men are considered to be weak. Whenever you see a society where men are susceptible, more susceptible, you're going to see more restrictions on women.
As we do with Afghanistan and.
Yes, and
they
then you see it,
cover-
yeah,
they
you
don't-
see it.
You know, they don't want to tempt men, so they've got them all covered up so they don't see anything.
Even when I was growing up, the women in my church were required to be more modestly dressed than the men. Okay? You know, they had to wear hairstyles that were maybe 20 years back, or, you know, something like that. No makeup, jewelry was frowned on, all of that kind of thing. And the assumption was that women could be too enticing, which meant that men were incredibly weak. Okay, every society where you see men are presumed to be weak, women are going to be restricted. That's just been human history, and it's what we see in societies today. And you can see also, like for instance, in cultures where that is strictly enforced, like where there's Sharia law kind of thing, as soon as a woman seems to violate Sharia law, the punishment against her or the instant reaction of the men is to take advantage of them. And that happens. I've seen it, you know. But the presumption is that the men in those societies are very susceptible, very weak. And as a defense mechanism, women are restricted. And that's the case here. So they're going to kill every woman who has slept with a man. But all the young girls who have not known a man by sleeping with him, keep alive for yourselves. All right.
To sleep with later.
Yeah, well, maybe, you know, maybe later, maybe not. I just, you know, this is outrageous behavior in the 21st century. It is outrageous. It is pedophilia. It is the most horrible, and murder associated with it. You know, no trials or anything like that. Just genocide. It's a genocide. And who ordered it? I mean, when you go through your Sunday school lessons, you hear about all the persecutions of the Egyptians, of the Hebrew people. You know, the most egregious one was what? Pharaoh decreed that all the male babies should be killed. Okay? And Moses escaped that because his parents were clever. Okay? But here, they're doing the same thing and far worse. But it's okay. But it's okay. Because God has decreed it.
I was reading, in fact, I brought it with me, which is a good point to bring this up if I can find it, but the Puritans versus the Indians,
Yeah.
the same kind of thinking, because God has ordained Israel
Yes.
to go into Canaan.
Yes.
The Puritans used this very thing
Yes. They
to
did.
massacre the Indians.
That's true. Yeah, yeah,
Says-
the logic is that manifest destiny is the same thing.
Let me read this to you. 400 men and women and children left dead amid the torching of their wigwams. It was a fearful sight to see them frying in the fire, and the streams of blood quenching the same. Horrible was the stink and sin. And, some of the will say, this is not right. But the justification was the Puritans were answered with God's licensing of slaughter in defense of Israel.
That's correct.
Sometimes the scripture declares women and children must perish with their parents. We had sufficient light from the Word of God for our proceedings.
That's exactly right.
But don't a lot of people use the Bible
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that
Yeah,
as
yeah.
a reason to do? I mean, for sure, in the Middle East, they use the Bible or their Torah
Yeah.
or their, what is it called, Quran.
The Quran,
Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
but back up a minute, okay? The Israelis are accused of committing genocide in Gaza. They are doing anything but, okay? They are doing everything they can to protect civilian population in Gaza. Hamas is doing all that it can. Like, for instance, this last strike that happened. They did an investigation to find out what happened. And the Israeli strike was from an aircraft, and they used a missile with only 35 pounds of explosive in it. So it's a very localized demolition. Very effective, by the way, well targeted, okay? The problem was that there was a Hamas weapons warehouse right next to them. And like 200 yards away, evidently one of these missiles lit off and killed those 45 civilians. Okay? So, the headlines are, Israel killed 45 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry. This is just typical of the way Hamas hides behind the civilian population and doesn't mind sacrificing them and will charge Israel anytime. Israel is not committing genocide in Gaza, no matter what the world is saying. They are not. They are more circumspect about civilian casualties than we ever were in Afghanistan or Iraq. I can just, we would never take the measures that Israel is taking to protect civilians. So, the current administration did an airstrike, and they not only blew up a guy who was working with us during our period in Afghanistan, but killed his whole family too. But that's okay. It was just a mistake, forget it. And then he's critical of it. It just bothers me. But anyway, yes. Not only in that instance in the Native American village, in many Native American villages where this took place, okay? But the Crusades were based on this. And the Crusades were supposed to be a campaign against Islamic occupation of Jerusalem, okay? But they went through Constantinople, and because the people there were Eastern Orthodox Christian, they massacred the population of Constantinople. Because they weren't Roman Catholic, they were Eastern Orthodox. So this kind of stupidity and stuff comes from this type of passage in the Old Testament. And I'm here to tell you that it's not justifiable.
Even then, what you're talking about, they castrated the men.
Yeah.
And threw the women and children in ovens. And,
That was another campaign, but yes, okay, I think that might have been during the time of Judges, but it just, this is crazy that people would use this as a justification. Now, over the centuries, and it has been a very slow process, we have come to study the morality and the ethics of war. We're doing much better about the morality and ethics of war today than we ever did before. The conversation really got going during the Crimean War, around 1810, 1811, because that was such a horrific situation. And most people don't even know why the Crimean War was fought or, any of that. But it was a stupid war, and it was fought stupidly. And there were a lot of needless casualties and a lot of abuse and everything else. So all of a sudden you had Florence Nightingale coming in and talking about, taking care of the wounded and things. And the discussion expanded into what constitutes an atrocity in war and what doesn't. And we came up with the Geneva Conventions prior to World War II, after World War I, prior to World War II. We had the Geneva Conventions that started to set limits. Basically, we look at several different models. There are, from a Christian standpoint, there are some who believe that because Jesus said, "Turn the other cheek," and pray for your enemies, that we should be pacifists as Christians. Okay, that's a stretch. The other model is based on this, where it's genocidal and it's holy war, where God sanctions something. Okay, and then there is. It started to develop in the Middle Ages, actually. Trying to think of the saint, but anyway, he was talking about a just war, and a just war is never a war of conquest. A just war is a war that is fought in defense of people, to defend the innocent, and it's not there to collect booty. It's not there for personal gain. It's not there to assume power. The problem that we have had in the 20th and the 21st century in America involvement in wars is that we have tried to use some of these principles of just war and have ended up, because of the intransigence of an enemy and skill, we've ended up in interminable wars, where instead of simply going in, grabbing the land and saying it's ours, and we're going to manage it, we've gone in there and tried to work within the culture, and these cultures are horribly corrupt, and there's no loyalty on the part of the population towards these cultures. And while we might be fighting something that is monstrously worse, we are fighting in defense of cultures that are indefensible. And so we end up in these quagmires, and that's basically what's been taking place since Vietnam. But I think, the model that was most successful was the model after World War II, where there was unconditional surrender, and the Americans and Allies occupied the territory, transformed them into democracies, and when they were stable enough, we backed off. But we ran into a problem even in this country, because after the Civil War there was Reconstruction. And I know, Reconstruction gets terrible press, but Reconstruction was still fighting against terrorist organizations in the South. And when Grant became president, he made it an issue to try and eradicate the influence of the Klan. He was reviled for it and all of that, and then you had the passage of the law of posse comitatus, where military can't enforce local laws. And, to a large extent, that's probably a good idea. But at the same time, Reconstruction only lasted 10 years. It wasn't long enough. And as soon as those occupation forces moved out, you had Jim Crow slam right in, and all the terrorism and everything else that was taking place right after the war came right back in, Jim Crow laws and everything else. So we ceded back, the country ceded back local control after 10 years, and they really weren't ready for it. And we paid the price in the 60s because of it. So, and have been paying the price ever since, because that was a horrible legacy in and of itself. It's bad enough that we had a legacy of slavery, but then to have a legacy of this kind of oppression going on within ostensibly a free country for so many generations was a black mark on us. It left us in a situation where we couldn't claim any moral high ground against anybody else who was persecuting their local population.
And didn't Hitler use that model
Yes, it did. Actually, the gun laws,
against the Jews?
yeah, the gun laws that we have adopted, that Hitler adopted, came from the gun laws that were imposed against black people in the South. A lot of the Jim Crow laws that we imposed on the black population, Henry Ford was a tremendous anti-Semite and promoted this, and Hitler used an awful lot of the material that was provided by Henry Ford to persecute Jews. So, we have our history too.
Yeah.
Okay, we have our history too, but you gotta watch out, because just because it's in the Bible doesn't mean that this is the thing to do. Okay, this is a horrible thing. This is a horrible thing. We would have people up on war crimes charges for doing this. All right. And the problem is that this, because it's here, it just persisted for thousands of years. This way of thinking persisted for thousands of years because it's in the Bible. And we gotta get beyond this.
Why was this put in the Bible?
It was put in the Bible because that was the culture of the day. You have here an accurate portrayal of the mindset of people in that period. And,
The period that the Bible was written.
yeah, the period that the Bible was written. The period that the Bible was written. Now, when you take it from there, it's going to take an awful lot of discussion, cultural change, we're going through this now, and we're going through it at light speed compared to the way it's taken place over human history, in considerations of how culture is supposed to be defined, what is good, what is bad, what is normal, what is abnormal. All of these things are coming at us very, very quickly, and because they're coming quickly and they're not being discussed over generations, it's really hard to figure it out. So that's the one who really determined how this thing was going to work out was Eleazar the priest. So he had to do with how things were going to be distributed.
Where was Moses in all of this?
Moses was the one who authorized the campaign, and God authorized the campaign, Moses gave the order. And but then when it came to how you work out what happened afterwards, it was up to Eleazar the priest. And there's an awful lot in here that still needs to be discussed, and we're kind of coming down to the end. So we're going to pick it up at the second part of chapter 31, because we ain't done with this yet, believe me. So thanks for being with us, and God bless you all.
Got a question.